Good evening. Today I'm having a chat with Pete Johnstone, and we're going to have a talk about the upcoming federal election and the voting, how to vote, what happens to your pages once you've finished voting, and we'll just see, because there is a lot of talk about preferences, so we just thought it might help to give people a bit of understanding how our system here in Australia works. So thank you for coming in and having a chat with me today.
Well, very much so. I'm very pleased to be here, and it's nice to talk.
So I have printed out, just in case we need to show them to show what we're talking about, I have printed out a couple of samples of the ballot papers, and I'll try and ask questions from I'll get him to explain it from a very basic sort of point of view, because it can be tricky to understand. So, okay, so on polling day or before, if people want to go in before, what will they find when they turn up at a polling booth?
Well, first of all, I'd just say I've also got some notes here because I want to cover everything. And if there's anything I say that you're not too sure about, do contact the Australian Electoral Commission because they'll give you the absolute top gen on that. But yeah, when you arrive at the polling booth, you can imagine that they're going to have a few people outside who are trying to give you how to vote cards, and trying to persuade you to vote for their candidate. And you know, it's a great opportunity if you're not too sure. Stop and have a chat with them, and they'll be very pleased to tell you why you should be voting for their candidate and not for the others. But say if you're not too sure, but then otherwise pick up a few how to vote cards perhaps as you go through, and then just go into the polling booth. People who are election helpers are not allowed to get too close to the entrance. So once you've got through the cordon, you should be fine going into the electoral centre.
Okay, and okay, so we get two pages once we get in there.
That's right. Yes.
So and.
Well, the first thing I'm going to be talking about probably is the one for the state seat. Here we are. We're voting for Page, and the other one that you'll get is for the Senate.
Yep.
But let's talk about the Page one first of all.
And we're not going to actually talk about specific party names in this interview because we don't want to be accused of influencing anything. So we're just going to talk in general terms about parties.
So I'll probably talk about candidate A, B, C, and so on.
Sounds good.
We'll see how it goes. But anyway, you can expect on your voting form there will be 10 boxes with 10 names beside them. Let's call them A, B, C, D, and so on down. The key thing to remember is you must put in a number in every box. And it must be numbered from 1 to 10. You can't have the same number used twice or miss out any numbers. You have to number it from number 1 to 10. So unfortunately, if you don't do that, your vote will be ruled invalid. And last election in Page, there were 5,000 votes that were ruled invalid. 5,000 votes that weren't counted. That's about 4%. Now, some of those people might have been people who really didn't want to put a vote in, and that's your democratic right. But there's quite a few people who probably thought they had voted and whose vote wasn't counted because they hadn't numbered numbers 1 to 10 in the boxes.
So they may have just put 1, or they may have crossed boxes, or...
Well, that's right.
1, 2,
quite a
3.
few different voting systems. You put crosses or ticks, and you mustn't do that here. You must put numbers 1 to 10 in that order, whichever candidate you like, down to the candidate you least like.
Okay. Okay, so with that, do you want to talk about what happens once that's finished and it goes off, or will we talk about how to fill out the other big page that we get?
Well, I'd just like to say a little bit more about the boxes 1 to 10. You probably will know 1 or 2 candidates pretty well, or you hopefully will, and you've got a pretty good idea of who you would like to vote for, or you may get that idea as you go into the election centre. If you know which candidate you'd like to vote for, why not get from them their how to vote card? If you're not sure about the other candidates, if you follow their how to vote card, that'll give you an idea of the people that the candidate you most prefer thinks would do a good job if they weren't elected. On the other hand, it is your vote. So if you want to vote completely independently of what anybody else has suggested to you, that's your vote, that's your choice. So please do that as well.
Yes, so if somebody really likes candidate A, and on candidate A's how to vote card, they have candidate B as their second choice, that doesn't have to have any influence on you. If you vote for candidate A, they can't make you vote for candidate B. They can't make your second preference be candidate B. You can make anyone
It's your preference, and what you decide to mark on your ballot card is between you and the ballot card. Nobody else will ever know. So, if you did like candidate A, and then you actually like candidate D, then E, and perhaps candidate B was somebody who put even number 10, that's completely up to you. But all you get with the how to vote cards is a bit of advice from the candidate you most prefer as to which candidates they would suggest. But there's no reason for you to follow that at all.
Yep. So it is learning. It is about learning about your candidates in your electorate.
That's right.
Because they're the ones you can vote for. You can't vote for the candidate that you like in somebody else's electorate.
And just to point out here that Clarence Media has been interviewing the candidates.
Yes, we've interviewed 5 so far and got some more to go yet.
And have you got an event coming up that?
Yes, so on Thursday evening we are hosting a Meet the Candidates at South Grafton District Golf Club. So that'll be from 6 o'clock, and we're still waiting to find out exactly how many candidates we'll have. It'd be fantastic to have all 10, but some of them have got to travel a fair way, so we can understand if they can't all get here.
Sure. Well, that'd be a great time to learn about the candidates.
Definitely. There'll be some questions asked, perhaps some tricky questions asked on that evening too.
And will that be available live online, or will it be
So
something
that
you
will
can
be
watch
live
afterwards?
online, but it will still remain online after the evening as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you. So anyway, your other question was what happens after the polling? Well, at 6 o'clock, if you're an election worker, it gets very busy. So at 6 o'clock on the actual voting day, they close the polls, and suddenly then they've got to start all the counting. And the counting will literally take weeks, because we have quite a complicated electoral system here, but the whole idea is to try and make it as fair as possible. And we make it complicated, but we try to make it fair. So what will happen first of all is they will take all of your ballots and they'll separate them into the top person that was voted. So have little piles there, and bigger piles for some candidates and little piles for other candidates.
So there'll be like 10 piles basically.
They will, and they'll then be able to count who was a favourite candidate in each of the polling booths, and that will appear online at some point. But then the next thing they've got to do is they've got to get an idea as quickly as they can of who's likely to actually win the election. And so before they start counting, they actually guess who the top 2 candidates are going to be.
I guess when you're looking at piles of paper, yes, you can make a fairly educated guess.
Well, according to the Australian Electoral Commission, they look at past polling patterns, so perhaps parties that have done particularly well in that seat before.
Yep.
And just a few other things that give them an indication of who they think their top 2 candidates are going to be. And then they do actually get that wrong, and every now and again you'll see a vote that's delayed, and the reason has been because the poll has gone what they call maverick, which is when instead of the 2 they thought were going to win, there's another 2 that are actually, or one of the 2 isn't one of them.
Yep.
And I have to say, my feeling on page, that might happen with us this time, you never know. But they'll choose their top 2 candidates, and then they'll go through everybody's voting card and see which of those candidates on people's voting card is the highest. And they'll basically put them then into 2 piles. And from those 2 piles, the 2 candidate preferred, they'll be able to tell then which candidate they think is going to win. But at the moment it's all provisional. But you'll see those results coming out possibly on the Saturday night, but certainly during the Sunday, and some of the close ones will be going on till the Monday. And they'll have a pretty good idea then of who's going to win. Yeah. Unless, of course, it suddenly appears that they picked the wrong 2, in which case they have to start all over again. And that'll be one of the delayed ones.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so...
Or just one other thing I would say on that. But what you also have a promise of is they're going to count them properly afterwards. So what they'll do is they'll look at all the piles of the top votes, and then what they'll do is they'll eliminate the person who got the lowest number of votes.
Yep.
They'll take their ballot papers, and they'll look at their second vote, and they'll put all those ballot papers then to the second vote.
And I think that's where some of the confusion over preferencing is coming in, I think, is because when the person with the least number of votes gets knocked out, it's not where they want your vote to go. It is still where you put your vote to go.
Absolutely, that's true.
So if your number 1 gets knocked out, your number 1 vote gets knocked out, the person that you put as number 2 gets your vote. Is that right?
That's right. It's what you put down. It's not what the candidate might have wanted.
It's not what the
They can't
candidate
give
that
away.
got knocked out puts down.
No, not at all. It's your vote.
Unless you've followed their how to vote card.
Indeed. In which case it is. So there we go. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else that you think's particularly relevant with regard to the House of Representatives?
No, nothing
Paper,
really. I think
or
that's the main things we've talked about.
is there, or shall we go on to the Senate sheet?
Well, let's go on and have a look at the Senate sheet.
So the House of Representatives, that is this area, that's page.
Sure.
Now the next one, that is the state.
It is indeed,
Yes.
So we're choosing here representatives for the upper house across the state. And I have to say, because they don't tend to be locals, a lot of us don't really know the
Don't
Senate
know who
people
they
at
are.
all. So you've got two choices. You've got above the line and you've got below the line. And this is just being held up at the moment.
I don't know whether it's a bit blurry. I had trouble finding something that could print off nice and clearly.
But basically, for most people,
I'm
we'll just
shaking.
be marking above the line.
Yep.
Because below the line is individual candidates, and you have to mark quite a few of those. You have to mark 12 of those, from 1 to 12, if you want to mark below the line. But to be honest, most of us actually just mark above the line. And we follow the parties in general. That's what a lot of people do. And above the line, you've got a series of parties or unaligned people, and you basically need to do at least 6 on those. So you go across and put
So
in
when
6.
you vote above the line, that party then gets to pick which of their members go through, whereas if you're voting below the line, you're picking the member.
That's right, yes. So if you went for one of the major parties, you would find that they'd have a party list. They'll have an order that's down there as to which who is going to be elected first. If they get 3 seats, then the top 3 people are elected. If they only get 2 seats, the third person misses out. And however, if you want to mark below the line, it could be that you know some of the candidates and perhaps the top pick for one of the parties is not somebody you'd really like to vote for, in which case you could do the below the line marking and just leave that person out. But it's much more complicated to do below the line, so unless you really have a strong opinion, I would recommend that you go for above the line. And each of the political parties will probably give you an idea as to which preferences they prefer you put down there. But again, it's completely up to you. Just make sure you follow the rules on the paper. And the other thing I'd say is if anybody's unsure about how to do it, ask the electoral workers because they will only be too pleased to help you
So
out.
I haven't actually looked at it. Do you know how many columns we've got this time?
There's quite a few. I haven't actually seen the one for us, but there are certainly quite a few. You have to mark 6, I understand.
So once you mark 6, can you mark more than 6?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
But it's the same thing. You've got to mark at least 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want to do more, then that's not a problem.
And if you mark 6, but, okay, let's say you pick all minor parties
Yep.
that don't get in, is your paper then just kind of null and void, like your vote doesn't go anywhere if the 6 that you marked are like the lowest 6 on the whole table?
No, it'll carry on following down the preferences, and at some stage
But then
it's
will
going to
that
start
be their
counting.
preferences? Like if my 6 are out, like,
Then at that stage the vote is exhausted.
yep.
But if you want to avoid that, then mark a
Keep
number
marking.
in every column, and then you'll get your preferences there.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so is there anything that we need to...
I think just to re-emphasise with your normal voting paper, mark all the boxes, 1 to 10.
Yep.
And you know the Senate one, why not mark all the boxes as well, from 1 down to as many as they go down to. Remember, the electoral workers will be there to help you, and if you get stuck, if you ask one of the voting people, people running the polling centre, they'll be able to tell you. And yeah, just possibly have a chat with the representatives of the candidate you most prefer as you go into the polling centre. You know, they can help you out or explain something more about their candidate
Yep.
if you wish.
Or if you get the chance, come along on Thursday night and you can have a chat with the candidates then, ask a few questions, listen to the questions that are asked, and get to know your candidates better.
I think Clarence Media has interviews of the candidates as well that we can see. Hasn't it?
Yes, so we've done a few, but we've still got a few to go.
Brilliant.
So, getting there.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? We're all
I think
finished.
that's it. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time this evening.
No worries.
And I hope that clears up a few things and explains what we all need to do between now and the 21st.
Thank you very much.
This is Leah for Clarence Media.